Hello everyone. In this video, what I want to do is give my thoughts on this game, after finally getting to experience it as somebody who has been playing From Software games PvP competitively for years. From late 2020 to mid 2026, I had an uninterrupted tournament winning streak across multiple From Software games and dozens of tournaments. I won't claim to know what's objectively the best for PvP in any given game, especially not something brand new like the Duskbloods, but I do hope you'll find my perspective valuable. I'm going to start off by saying that my opinion of the game after fully playing all sessions of the network test is generally very positive. I particularly enjoyed my last session where I won every single match and even had a run where I finished with 201 virtue. I didn't even think you could get this high, but yeah, honestly I had a blast. The goal of this video isn't to complain about a lack of perfect balance or ramble about evident things that pretty much everyone has pointed out at this point, like the imperfect frame rate or the inconvenience of the switch to exclusivity. I'm going to go over each phase of a match and talk about things I found interesting and why, and how I believe this will affect how the game is played over time, as the player base improves. Phase 1 mostly has you looking around for ways to start strengthening your character. Most of the trespassers are a little too strong at this point to kill quickly, so you're looking for trash mobs for quick XP, or those werewolf mini-bosses for some easy early repulsion virtue, a good kin with some luck, a weapon infusion, or some flame virtue laying around. One thing I actually really like is that outside of the occasional sigil event, there is no massively impactful reward for killing another player in this phase, meaning that whether or not you should take a PvP encounter is a lot more context dependent. If you notice you and another player are both heading towards the same point of interest, you might hesitate between not engaging and choosing a different spot to remain uncontested, or take a risk to potentially sabotage their progression and push yourself further ahead. How crowded are the other areas? Are the others doing the same? Is this just a waste of time? I like how important it is to be aware of what's going on this early in the match and how rewarded you are for being wiser with your decisions. This is definitely the phase where I can see the nitrine sweats shine, since your best way to obtain chunks of virtue comes from PvE here. During phase 2, at this point your character is a little stronger, and while you can still progress a decent amount by doing more of what you did in phase 1 here, your best reward comes from the ritual site. I like the dynamic created during the ritual site. It naturally leads to some free-for-alls, since you actually get virtue for killing players there, but the presence of on-site objectives, that being the pledge pillars, combined with the intricacy of the map these pillars appear in, keep the dynamic interesting. Say you reached a pledge pillar and completed a pledge before anyone else, and that a group of players then decide to target you, seeing as you have a pledge, and kill you. You won't just lose your progress because you were targeted for being ahead, since your pledge isn't lost upon death, but only when another player finishes taking theirs at the pledge pillar you used. So while you're respawning, the group that killed you are now going to be busy fighting each other for a chance to take your pledge, giving you an opening to come back and defend. So while it's still definitely possible to get screwed over by something random, I like that you remain rewarded for taking the right steps and getting ahead in terms of progression, even if the other players are out to get you. Every ritual site has 4 or 5 pledge pillars, and since all 8 players are still in the game in this phase, you can imagine a situation where there's essentially one 1v1 happening at each pillar. It seems intentionally designed for that to be possible if all players choose to play it a little safer and avoid a massive chaotic group fight where you're super susceptible to being randomed out by something. I think that's a really good way to provide some stability to the matches, dividing the attention of the players this way. That's something that I was worried about at first, but I think they did a good job implementing those mechanics thoughtfully, at least in the build-up phases. Phase 3 plays fairly similarly to Phase 2, the most impactful difference being the elimination of 2 players from the previous phase, so you're running around looking for more upgrades until the ritual sites are established. 3 players are at risk of being eliminated, and the amount of pledge pillars per site doesn't change. This actually feels like a very stable phase, I'd say, because if you don't want to engage in a massive group fight, you're a lot more likely to find a pledge pillar somewhere else that's either vacant or being guarded by only one person. I like how often your ability to take 1v1s actually matters in this game. I think in all 3 build-up phases, they hit this good middle ground where the baseline for survival is being able to defend from one other player. Free-for-all group fights are more of a spectacle, but their random nature makes them inherently less competitive, so I can see higher skilled players choosing a more stable alternative if there isn't a clear kill-steal opportunity in the group fight to immediately boost their virtue during the rituals of phases 2 and 3. This brings us to the final and, in my opinion, least interesting phase of the match so far, the free-for-all grail battle. This is an opinion that I saw shared by other competitive players and even casual players online. This phase to me seems like the least thoughtfully designed aspect of this game, which is a shame because it's what determines who ends up being the winner. It is a disappointingly bland rendition of a group fight on a flat arena with no verticality and sometimes not even any cover, with none of the more nuanced mechanics present in the previous phases to somewhat divide the attention of the remaining players and provide some stability to the encounters. I mentioned earlier that I liked how consistently you were rewarded for making more educated calls throughout the entirety of the match, but all of that can just go out the window in this grail battle. It's way too easy to just decide to gank one person to get them out early so you can 1v1 the last player. You get a boost in power based on your virtue, which is nice, but I feel like if anything it sort of puts a target over your head in the same way that taking a pledge early does in phases 2 and 3, only without any of the additional mechanics and events to not make the best option for the two other players be to just gank you to death, not wanting to deal with a powered up player. While it's a little more ambiguous to determine if the game favors the attacker or defender / evader in a 1v1 situation, at this point at least, it is clear that surviving a 2v1 is harder than ever, since you'll run out of stamina extremely quickly, since evasive maneuvers consume lots of stamina, while actual attacks do not. I still won every match in my final session, even when people tried to team up against me, but I think I only achieved this because the people I was going up against weren't any good. Two somewhat competent players teaming up against one person will pretty much always get what they want in the full game. We do know that it will be possible to customize our character in a way that influences what the grail battle will be, and that one of the options will be a PvE fight where you team up with the other players like in Night Train. And honestly, despite being a PvP guy, I might just opt for that one, because the grail battle just feels way too random at the moment. I understand that the chaotic aspect of it is an intentional addition, and is something important to the game's identity, but I think all of that was executed a lot more effectively and thoughtfully in the build-up phases. This final segment is going to be a messy yap over the finer details of the combat system itself. It's going to be a lot more rambly since the structure of the test didn't allow for any controlled testing in private sessions, but I still spend the last moments of the network test theory crafting offensive and defensive flowcharts. The first thing you'd want to look for to construct a game plan is what tools your character has to force a specific interaction from your opponent that you could punish should you predict it. Take for example Elden Ring, where unreactable attacks are the cornerstone of your offensive game plan, forcing your opponents to dodge on prediction or block, which can both be punished with different sequences. In the Duskbloods, it looked like almost everything was reactable, even with the input delay and frame rate. The exception I do recall looking back were some air dash attacks, like the Senators and I think Albert's as well. Depending on how much you're able to vary your timing after performing an air dash, I think that could be one way to force opponents to block for safety, but the actual action itself is still quite costly since it involves a dash which takes out like a third of your stamina, on top of being telegraphed. Yan's and Albert's ranged weapons also looked good at forcing blocking to be picked over dodging. When close enough, it looked like I could always get a bit of chip damage, which was very valuable since it prevented the opponent from slowly regaining posture by staying out of my melee range. It was really good when chasing people down that were about to have their posture broken. They couldn't dodge around forever as any small bit of chip could spell doom for them, and it forced them to either turn and burn or block, then possibly guard counter. Guard counters were quite easy to parry on reaction once you see the opponent isn't blocks them. Honestly, parries would deserve their own video. They felt very different to traditional Souls parries. The way I had timed my inputs during successful parries reminded me more of For Honor parries actually, which really threw me off, but in a good way. They feel way more responsive than you'd expect when you first pick up the game and feel the input delay and such. Another thing to note is that the parry beast roar itself doesn't put the opponent in any sort of stun and does 0 posture damage if the opponent doesn't attack. Meaning that if you ever put somebody in block stun, you can just wait and see what they do from the block, since both most likely options can be beaten on reaction. If they guard counter, you parry. If they go for a setup parry, you punish with R1s, or even a gunshot if your ranged option is fast, like Albert's. The conclusion I came to is that if you're running out of stamina or are facing an attack or sequence that is forcing your shield to come out, it appears far safer to look for something to dodge on reaction after blocking. I'm not sure if you could stagger R1s on block to catch an immediate roll out of block stun like you can in Elden Ring, for example. I do have a clip that I wish I could show you where I roll catch somebody by staggering standard R1s on hit DS3 style, intentionally foregoing the second hit and true combo to catch a panic roll out of hit stun. I haven't had the opportunity to see if the same sequence can be replicated on block, but realistically they wouldn't have a reason to panic roll out of hit or block stun without the threat of an unreactable option from the attacker. These are definitely the sorts of hyper-specific interactions that will require a closer look to be taken at them in a controlled environment after the game's full release. So despite analyzing a lot of footage, I can't speak on them with too much confidence at this time. That's gonna be about it for me. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you found this video insightful. Thank you for watching.